cybersecurity. So this session before lunch has two parts. First of all, our moderator is also a senior expert on cybersecurity, so he will share some insights and findings of a recent study he conducted for the government of Singapore. He will tell you more about it. And then he will be joined by a number of panelists, and they will have an interesting conversation about cybersecurity, managing risk across the fintech ecosystem. And of course, you can ask questions via the app again, and then we're going to proceed for lunch. But before we proceed for lunch, I will show you one more time the slides where the breakout will take place. So our cybersecurity expert has actually, do we have a backdrop slide for him? Is there a backdrop slide? He's actually based in Zurich and in London at the same time. He's one of the leading cybersecurity experts around and has advised all over the world, B2C, B2B. And if you look at his name, the question comes up, was his job choice actually destined when you look at his name? So he knew probably in advance that he's going to be a leading cybersecurity expert. He will elaborate on that at the beginning. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Peter Hacker.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me here today with you. In fact, it's both an honor and a pleasure to address the topic cybersecurity with you, and particularly with a focus on managing risk across the fintech ecosystem. It was briefly mentioned, I recently conducted a study in Singapore. That particular study was done for the Singapore Reinsurance Association and was backed by parts of the MAS as well. What I would like to do over the next 15 minutes, I first would like to give you a brief introduction into the cyber world specifically and around that particular study, and address a number of the findings which we had, particularly based on scenarios on the one side, particularly based on potential losses we see, and particularly as we are in Asia, talking also about Asian countries and specifically hits with a focus on financial institutions as well, but also talking about government. Thereafter, I'll be joined by my fellow panelists, and we'll focus on specifically on the aspects of digital access, triggering broad digital financial and social inclusions, and particularly what it means, this type of innovations in the form of challenging aspects and requirements for financial institutions and governments in itself. Let me start with a quote. The philosopher Marshall McLuhan, who some of you might know, once said, "It is the framework which changes with each new technology, and not just the picture within it." This is particularly relevant for all of you, and particularly relevant for the financial services industry and for governments. Let's remember the following thing. In the financial service industry, private or public sector, and governments in particular, it is vital to know as much as you can about the future. Because you're not investing actually in the past, you're investing in what should come out in the future. Now, when it comes down to bridge this in cybersecurity, this is absolutely crucial. What happened in cybersecurity and risk incidents in the past are very often absolutely not relevant for a financial institution or for a government. Attacks are changing, as we will discuss with our fellow panelists shortly. The rate of change currently when it comes down to cybersecurity is rapidly changing. 1 second, it was science fiction. Today, and now, it's science fact. Changes are good for everyone, as long as they don't caught us on the back foot at the end of the day. Now, cyber risk has become a real major stakeholder issue for financial institutions and governments in itself. And I'm afraid to say that it's still often massively underestimated or not appreciated enough. Over the last 12 months, I had the honor to undertake a specific cyber risk study. This particular study was particularly driven by the Singapore Reinsurance Association, and it addresses potential catastrophe scenarios for governments and major sectors, amongst others, the financial service sector. Let's have a look at this particular study and the background. So what we did really is specifically, we looked at the global DDoS attack backed by ransomware in the form of a wiper. Some of you might see certain similarities to what has happened in 2017 around WannaCry and NotPetya, but this time we have gone certain further steps forward. We're not just talking about a ransomware attack, we're backing it up by DDoSs. DDoSs are distributed denial of service attacks, which are very relevant for financial institutions, as we'll see later on. The other aspect which is happening when it comes down to cyber risk today, particularly for governments, you might be attacked by different vectors. So one time it's a malware, the other time is actually it's a DDoS. Now, what we did in addition, we looked at 8 different additional sectors. We looked into 3 catastrophe scenarios. The first one was really around the aspect of potential power outage. Second one was cloud and DNS, domain network service failure. And the third one, really a combination of the 3. Think about a specific Armageddon on this particular area, which could be the following one. You have a massive power outage. By having a massive power outage, you might have limited access to cloud or no access at all to your domain network services. This is a nightmare and can be a nightmare. So what we did, we looked into an impact which could happen on a global basis between 2 to 5 days maximum, and particularly not just for the private sector, but also for the public sector. Let's have a look briefly what that means for financial institutions in particular. Here's a heat map, what happened in ransomware for WannaCry 2017. And afterwards, I will show you what happened in this particular scenario we were using. So here we're using 230,000 potential incidents around the world. In the study we looked into, in the combination of a cloud failure and specific power outage failure, we look at an implication of about 800,000 companies around the world. What do I want to say with this particularly? Cyber risk is a really global risk, whether you're a financial institution, whether you're a government. It can impact you from anywhere around the world with very limited diversification at the end. So what does that mean, particularly if we look into specific aspects of economic losses? Now, the way we looked into it is the following way. We split it around the world, North America. We looked into Europe, Asia, rest of the world. So you have scenario 1 to scenario 3. As I said, 1 is the massive power outage, 2, cloud, malware, DNS, and the 3 is a combination of the 3. So overall, we predicted specific economic losses between 121 billion and 234 billion US dollars. Potential impact to companies in the range between 360,000 and 780,000 companies, which has massive economic losses at the end of the day on a per country basis. Now let's talk about what that means on a global hit basis, and then I will go into financial institutions and also government. How this needs to be read is the following way. So here are the sectors we're looking into, and particularly the finance sector includes private and governments, okay? Private and governments. And the important thing is the following thing here, along the lines of, if you look into $100 as a potential economic loss for a government, or for a government such as, for instance, Singapore, then we're predicting at the moment that specifically for Singapore in itself, we would have around a loss in the area of 9% falling into the financial services sector. Now, if you look at some of the other countries, you know, looking at China, we have 12%. We're looking into Japan, you have 11%. This, ladies and gentlemen, is really important for you to take away. And as we'll talk into the session shortly, it's very important to recognize cyber risk is a risk which is independent whether you're a public sector company, government, or you are a private sector company. It's something which is here to stay, and it's something we'll discuss in detail shortly. Now, before I'm asking my fellow panelists to come to the table, I'd like to briefly outline what script we had in mind to go through, the agenda specifically. So we'll talk about the threats we see particularly in your area, for the financial services sector, for government specifically. We'll talk about the heat map, which means particularly corporate attacks versus state-sponsored attacks. We talk about the challenges you will see in the future, or you already have today as entities, the regulatory developments, new solutions, social inclusion, financial inclusions, the exposure overall. And last but not least, we would like to discuss also what are potential solutions at the end for the various of us. So capturing this around, now I'd like to enter into the panel session. I'd like you to give a warm welcome to my panelists. We have the following people here today. We have Catherine Foster, we have Katie Gong, and we have Nigel Pear. Katie is from PwC, Nigel specifically from University of Western Australia, and we have Ms. Foster actually from the Digital Sustainable Financial Alliance. Thank you very much. So great to have you all here today. Let me kick off this straight. As you have seen, we're predicting significant potential losses around the world when it comes down to cyber. And what I would like to do is I really like to start with you, Katie, from the point of view when you specifically look at the threat risk landscape we see for governments on the one side and for financial institutions. Where do you see the biggest challenge they are confronted with right now?
Okay, thank you, Peter. So very happy to be here. Good morning, everyone. My name is KT. I'm a partner in PwC. So I'm like Peter, same, also a professional hacker by trade. So what I do basically is that every day I deal with this issue. You know, I hack the systems. Of course, we are white hat. Our objective is to uncover the holes and help our client to solve the issue. So in the banking and government sector, I would say that I probably done anything that you can imagine in the banking sector. You know, I hack e-banking, I can transfer money out, I can steal data, you know, of some of the reputable banks that, of course, I cannot disclose the name, but you know, all this we have done that before. And also on the other hand is that I help to a lot of clients to do a breach response. So also dealt with the SWIFT case. Some of you would have known. I think that was like 5-6 years ago already. So on the other hand, you know, I'm trying to, you know, save the client from this sort of attack, etc. So my biggest takeaway of 13 years in this field is that I see a lot of misunderstanding about this cybersecurity risk issue. First of all, I think we all sitting down here as a human being, we need to recognize actually this issue can only happen in cyberspace. Okay? So if you don't want to be hacked, just turn off your phone. But the problem is, you and I here, we recognize that the new world that we all created, which is called the cyberspace, is the future. If you look at what we're trying to discuss today, fintech, blockchain, AI, cloud, you're talking about all the investment, and you and I as a human being believe that that is the future. So first of all, we need to recognize that this is the world created by human being. Okay? Second thing is that, are we protecting them enough? So that I think this is a second question we need to recognize that ourselves. And third, who actually understand the real concept of a cyberspace? Okay, I will bring out this thing because cyberspace is not easy to digest. Okay, it's something that you cannot visualize. Okay, I'm not talking about life and death. Life and death, if you ask me, it's easier because you see someone bleeding, you can try to go help a person. If someone tap into our conference today and listen to us, do we know? We don't know. but we need the visibility. That's the difference. So a lot of people may think, oh, we have a policy. I can tell you policy are useless. The only useful policy is that you can cascade the sets of policy into technology. If not, a set of policy will be just a bunch of paper because it does not cascade down to technology. I can tell you, I go into many banks, oh, we got these policy procedures, ISO 27001, but they still get hacked. So in short, what I'm trying to say is that, sorry, I've taken a lot of time. So in short, the biggest challenge that I see is that I think I struggle to find a lot of community that really understand the concept of cyberspace. If people really understand the cyberspace, I think we can solve this problem collectively.
Katie, thanks. Nigel, looking at it more from a, let's say, specific financial institution point of view, what should financial institutions, or let's say also government entity investing in the financial institution area, particularly look out not to fall into the cyber trap?
Yeah, thanks. I see this as an opportunity for organisations and regulatory authorities. And I probably look at the coin from two sides. On one side, you have consumers that are consuming, and on the other side, we have products or vendors like the ones in the marketplace, which are providing an experience. And in the middle, you have a regulatory regime, which is making sure everything is running smoothly. So from the side of call it the vendor or the organisation providing, I think they just need to focus simply on providing a trustworthy and safe experience. And that will have a technological component to it. That might have encryption of people's data, for example. It might have cloud storage, as was mentioned, and lots of different pieces of technology which actually can be well secured. Of course, we do need policy around it. those pieces of paper. And we need it to be well understood what that policy is. And that guidance should come from industry experts already in the field of financial services. We can leverage some of the great ideas that are out in the hallway today and other ones that are being trialled. We can leverage that experience from other competent regulators, but also the nation itself needs to come up with its own set of rules of the road, if you like, for how they want the operators in their jurisdiction to be. So there is no silver bullet to fixing anything online. We're going to need a range of technical responses, we're going to need a range of policy responses, and then when we flip the coin over, we need to build resilience into our users so that if they do have a bad experience online, that they know how to react and respond and then still keep on doing it. Because as was mentioned, this is the new normal, so we're not going back to anything else.
So in other words, it really means, companies, governments, what they need is actionable intelligence. They need to look at things from a point of view. It's not about if it's going to happen, it's going about when it's going to happen, and they need to be stress tested specifically. So decision makers really will have to understand the consequences of their decisions. Now let me flip over briefly to Catherine, obviously from the Sustainable Digital Finance Alliance. Your focus is more on emerging technology for social impact, for financial inclusion, climate change, and other sustainable development goals. Let's elaborate a little bit on that, because that's very interesting, I have to say, when I saw it the first time, a very interesting bridge into cybersecurity.
Yes, actually, I am the outlier on this panel. I'm not a technologist or security specialist, but I do come from, I'm a former Canadian diplomat on human security, building out in the 90s some of the big initiatives around conflict situations, refugees, conflict diamonds. And I also led out the European Union's climate kick, so the innovation and accelerator, largest one in the world around clean technologies. And also built out a few of these solutions myself using blockchain and integrated technology. And what I found is that integration of solution, you're talking about services for the users. Mm-hmm. What I come from is that notion of building in integrated technologies and the underlying bias and problems that we might be building into this architecture or building into these processes, not just in terms of the data, but in terms of who we're inviting to provide those solutions and also the problematics of trying to integrate this new technology into these systems.
What problematics do you see in concrete from your side at the moment?
Where do we start? You know, and I'm tech agnostic, even though I've actually built out some of these solutions. I actually then have created a vetting process with the Beak Center and Rockefeller Foundation. It's called ethics, but ethics isn't about moral judgment. Ethics is about sound vetting of not only the data, not over the people, but the processes you're doing. So let's take, for example, the hackathons and innovation process, where a lot of the blockchain solutions are coming forward. Well, you know, when we bring in young technologists who come from a certain cultural, political background, their understanding perhaps of a security situation, a refugee situation, might be quite different from those of us that have worked on the ground and been there and understand the legacy issues. And sometimes we're starting already from questionable credibility and issues on the ground and in the systems we've built. And now we're inviting technology in as this sort of neutral savior to build out solutions, because it's offering immutability, it's offering non-judgment, but it is not neutral. You can actually build in bias. So for example, I've been on judges on many innovation hackathons, and you've seen applications that have gotten through to the top 10, and it's a whistleblower application, for example, and you're seeing it actually putting an individual in danger through the processes that are required in order for them to upload data, for example. That's just one example. Or another is the potential for just the data regulatory frameworks. We did a solution on the maritime fuel traceability and the fraud that we've been seeing in that leading up to the IMO cap that's coming up. And the assumptions around the data availability and the format are enormous, and that actually is about 1/4 of the problem going in. So when we're building out technology that makes these assumptions, we're actually building in more vulnerability.
It's about data availability and accessibility at the end of the day, absolutely. Katie, coming back to you, and particularly the debate we nowadays see, a lot of people talk about new types of cyber attacks. And I always throw it in, well, are they really new types? Or are they different vectors, combinations of past attacks, but then, you know, packaged new in a certain way? What's your view on that for financial institutions particularly?
Yeah, so I think crime is a crime, right? So I think I see, I don't know, maybe it sounds a little bit negative. So whenever there's a human being, there's always some good guys, there's always some bad guys, right? Like I mentioned, the way we believe that cyberspace is the future. So we keep dumping data into it. You know, you see a lot of cases, you know, like a couple, they're sitting opposite each other, they don't talk to each other, they talk via WhatsApp, you know. So they leverage on like cyberspace to communicate, you know, data mining, blockchain again. You know, the crime is just shifting to the new world that we all created. So I think the motive is always the same. However, I think since you point out financial institution from a hacker perspective, what we call the enticement value is always the highest, because you got everything. You got personal data, you got credit card, you got money. Of course, you know, as a bad guy, you want to rob someone who got money, right? So you don't want to go in somewhere poor and do something. So the value is always there, so that attracts the hacker, right? But one thing I want to point out, what is the difference now is that we are in the, we all talk about disruptions, right? So I'm not sure you all heard about zero-day vulnerability, okay? Zero-day vulnerability basically is those holes that the software provider, they don't even know. Say, for example, you're using Apple or Microsoft or any type of software, okay? There is a vulnerability, there's a hole in that software there where Microsoft doesn't even know. Why is that, okay? Let me explain. People like us do that job. We find a bug, we give it to Microsoft, they pay us. But you know what? If I find a hole in Microsoft software, I will not give it to them. You know why? Because there will be other people pay me higher. And I will save it for other people or particular government. So what I'm trying to say is that the threat that most of us here, maybe I'm not sure what's your background, most of us here are consumer of technology. Okay, you bought a piece of software to your environment, it comes with a hole that you don't even know. That's exactly what happened in WannaCry, by the way. I'm not trying to bring out the nation state angle. You probably know that the WannaCry, it had a 0 day, it was held by a government, so I think you can read about that. And to me, WannaCry was created to shut that hole. It wasn't an attack. It was a government war, actually. That's my view, okay, but we can debate about that. So to me is that what I'm trying to introduce to you is that the threat that you are managing today is out of your control, because if you bought a phone, it comes with a hole. So what you need to do is to focus more on detection capability, because you don't even know it comes with a backdoor. So what you need to do is actually, you know that you cannot prevent this issue because it comes with a hole. So all you need to do is to focus on some other capabilities that help you to detect when it's a backdoor. When the hackers come into the environment, they will